Hi, thank you for coming on to our documentary.
No problem.
Could you please introduce yourself and what you do?
Okay. My name is Pelham. I'm an international television broadcaster, so I specialise in royal affairs, business opportunities, and really all-day products as well.
Okay, great. So just to go into the questions, my first question for you would be, from a Western perspective, how do you view and evaluate China's development in the past 75 years, especially in the past 20 years in terms of its economy? And additionally, in a world where the face of China can't be ignored, how do you see its role evolving in the coming decades?
Yeah. So earlier this year, China announced an ambitious growth of 5% in 2024 alone, whilst Britain only has an expectation of 0.2%. So it is a massive growth in China in the first place. The economic growth over the past 2 decades is to people in China has been an astounding 3,000%. At the World Economic Forum annual meeting of the new champions, President Xi stated, China, large market, is open for business. The rapid growth of new industries and drivers have buttressed the sound and sustained development of the Chinese economy. Peng Seng, the president of the China Society of Economic Reform, stated he was fully confident that the reality of 5% growth will happen this year. So I think, obviously, from a British perspective as well, Britain looks to China as well as really the growth provider to actually sustain world economic opportunities at the moment. And I think, from green issues as well, obviously they are one of the leading countries in the world now that is really creating sustainable products, sustainable renewable energy.
How do you see its role evolving in the coming decades with this?
I think it's going to be a key role now in the economy, quite honestly, of the world. Because I think, globally at the moment, China is not a sleeping giant anymore. It is a giant of its own volition. And I think the economy at the moment is that it will drive other economies at the same time. Obviously, there may be some issues because some countries want to really create opportunities or non-opportunities for China, and so they have got to take those into account. And I know that, for example, in things like electric cars, there's an ambition that the new President Trump wants to have a Chinese factory creating electric cars in America whilst he is president. So I think the reality at the moment is that China is really creating, it's the engine behind the world economies.
Okay, thank you. And going into our second question, what do you think are the most efficient measures that can be implemented at an accelerated rate to create better relationships between global economies and the environment on a global scale?
I think the reality, first of all, is that creating better opportunities, it's all down to communications as well. So communications like this, where we can actually build bridges between all nations at the same time. I think governments as well need to really work as hard as possible to create those bridges at the same time. And I think the reality at the moment is that with China especially, it is really creating a vast amount of opportunities right across the world. If you look in places like Africa, for example, at the moment, the amount of goodwill, good efforts, money being put into that country to actually drive those economies forward. And I think the reality at the moment is that President Xi himself is doing an incredible job to actually drive not only the Chinese economy, but looking to see how he can grow Chinese business right across the world.
Thank you. And going into our third question, focusing on China's economic development and deepening reform and opening up in the past 20 years, particularly its role in the green industry as a core element of its development strategy. How do you judge the measures China has taken to promote its green transitioning?
So again, President Xi announced at the Climate Ambition Summit, China will lower its CO2 emissions per unit of gross domestic product by 65% from 2005 levels. So he will increase the share of non-fossil fuels in primary energy consumption to around 25%. And most importantly, Yale University, which is the top university in America, has an environmental school, and it states that China has achieved stunning growth in its installed renewable capacity over the past two decades, far outreaching the rest of the world. And in November 2023, China climate envoy Xi Jinping and John Kerry, USA climate envoy, shook hands on a pledge to triple renewable energy globally by 2020 or 2030. So I think the reality at the moment is all the parties are talking. What is really necessary right now is, as I've been to conferences before where the Chinese have actually sort of helped in so many areas of work, because they have such large amounts of skill bases themselves. For example, in the pharmaceutical industries, basically at the moment it takes about 10 years for a drug to actually go through to final release. But China have said in the past that we can do the same thing in 10 months. Instead of putting 3 or 4 people on a trial basis, they can put 10,000 people on a trial basis to actually gain these drugs much quicker. And so I think the reality, what is happening at the moment is that President Xi is driving the force forward, and it's being seen in all sorts of ways. So for example, again, what is the royal household doing in Britain? That's obviously one of my main interests at the same time. And already Prince William has been reaching out to President Xi for his Earthshot campaign as well, because he understands straight away that China is a powerhouse especially of renewable green energy issues and products at the same time, things like electric cars, things like solar panels. And he's really wanting now to actually build bridges between China and Britain at the same time. And I think it's very, very important now that the economy that is growing in China is used to inspire other economies across the world.
What impact do you think these initiatives have on the global economy?
I think that they can be enormous, is the reality to it. Really, I think at the moment, providing there's no protectionism being put against China, then China can actually help grow the wealth right across the world at the same time. I know in Britain that China is wanting to invest more in Britain, and Britain, I hope, is open for business at the same time. And when you look at some of the other countries that it's working with, continents like Africa and like India as well, these are the growing economies that will actually inspire growth and trade right across the world. And I think the future for China is to become the engine of global economies, to inspire all of the economies and create aspirations that other governments, other countries can really look at and try to emulate for themselves.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your expertise in this industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.